The sun was just beginning to rise over the city skyline, casting long shadows across the bustling construction site. It was a crisp autumn morning, and Ethan Carter tightened his grip on the hard hat he held in one hand as he walked toward the towering scaffolding that marked the entrance of the project. At 24 years old, Ethan wasn't new to this line of work. He'd been working odd jobs at construction sites since high school. But today felt different. This wasn't just another job. It was an opportunity to prove himself. Ethan had always dreamed of becoming an architect. He loved the idea of creating something from nothing, of turning raw materials into structures that stood tall against time. But life hadn't handed him many chances to pursue that dream. Instead, he worked with bricks, steel beams, and concrete mixers, doing whatever it took to make ends meet. Still, whenever he could, Ethan spent hours sketching designs late into the night, imagining what might be possible if someone gave him a chance. Today, however, there would be no sketches or dreams, only orders. Ethan had been assigned to assist Marcus Kane, a name whispered reverently and sometimes fearfully by everyone on site. Marcus was known not only for his brilliance but also for his arrogance. A man who wore tailored suits even when visiting dusty construction zones. Marcus commanded respect or demanded it, depending on how you looked at it. As Ethan approached the blueprint table where Marcus stood reviewing plans, he noticed the way other workers seemed to give him a wide berth. No one wanted to be caught in the crosshairs of Marcus's sharp tongue. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped forward. "Good morning, Mr. Kane," Ethan said politely, extending his hand. "I'm Ethan Carter. I'll be assisting you today." Marcus glanced up briefly, his piercing blue eyes scanning Ethan from head to toe before returning to the papers spread out before him. Without looking up again, Marcus replied curtly, "You're late." Ethan blinked, confused. He'd arrived 15 minutes early. Before he could respond, Marcus continued, "Don't waste my time. Grab those measurements we need for Section C and get out of my sight." For a moment, Ethan felt anger flare inside him. Who did this guy think he was? But he swallowed it down. Arguing wouldn't help. Nodding stiffly, Ethan turned around and headed toward Section C, determined to focus on the task at hand. Over the next few hours, Ethan observed Marcus closely. The architect moved through the site like a king surveying his kingdom, barking instructions and criticizing every detail. If a beam was slightly off-center, Marcus made sure everyone within earshot knew about it. When a worker accidentally dropped a tool, Marcus launched into a tirade about incompetence. Despite his frustration, Ethan couldn't deny that Marcus had a keen eye for precision. Everything Marcus pointed out was technically correct. It was just the way he delivered his critiques that grated on people's nerves. By lunchtime, most of the crew had retreated to their trailers, eager to escape Marcus's relentless scrutiny. Ethan stayed behind, though, studying the blueprints pinned to the wall. He'd always been fascinated by architecture, and these plans were impressive. Yet as he examined them more closely, he noticed something odd. One section of the foundation appeared weaker than it should have been. It wasn't enough to cause immediate problems, but over time it could lead to structural issues. Summoning his courage, Ethan approached Marcus once more. "Excuse me, Mr. Kane," he began cautiously. "I was looking at the blueprints, and I think there might be a problem with the load distribution in Section D. If we adjust the reinforcement here." Marcus cut him off mid-sentence. "What are you talking about?" he snapped, turning to face Ethan with an incredulous expression. "Do you even understand what you're saying? You're a laborer, not an engineer." "I know I don't have formal training," Ethan replied, evenly refusing to back down. "But I've studied this stuff on my own, I think." "You think?" Marcus interrupted again, his voice rising. "Thinking doesn't build buildings, son. Experience does. And clearly, you lack both." A heavy silence fell between them. Ethan clenched his fists, fighting the urge to defend himself further. He knew arguing wouldn't change Marcus's mind. Instead, he forced himself to nod respectfully and step away. But as he walked back to his post, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus's arrogance was masking something deeper. Why was the architect so quick to dismiss anyone who challenged him? Was it insecurity? Pride? Or simply years of being told he was the best? Little did Ethan know, this encounter was only the beginning. Over the coming days, tensions between him and Marcus would escalate, leading to a clash that neither man anticipated. And while Marcus believed he had all the answers, he was about to discover that sometimes brilliance can come from the most unexpected places. For now, though, Ethan returned to his duties, quietly vowing to prove Marcus wrong, not through words but through action. Because deep down, Ethan knew he had something to offer, even if no one else saw it yet. The sun climbed higher in the sky, bathing the construction site in golden light. Workers called out to each other, machinery hummed in the background, and dust swirled in the air. To an outsider, it might have seemed like any ordinary day, but beneath the surface, unseen currents were shifting. Two men, worlds apart in experience and attitude, were on a collision course, one that would test their skills, challenge their egos, and ultimately redefine what they thought was possible. And as Ethan picked up his tools and got back to work, he couldn't help but wonder, what would happen next? The days that followed were a blur of activity for Ethan. Despite Marcus's dismissive attitude, he threw himself into the project with relentless determination. While others grumbled about Marcus's impossible standards, Ethan quietly excelled. He had an uncanny ability to anticipate problems before they arose and find solutions that saved both time and resources. One afternoon, as workers struggled to position a massive steel beam into place, disaster struck. A support cable snapped under the strain, sending the beam crashing down onto the scaffolding below. Panic rippled through the crew as shouts filled the air. Such accidents weren't uncommon on large construction sites, but they were dangerous and costly. Repairs could set the project back by weeks if not handled properly. Ethan, who had been working nearby, sprang into action without hesitation. Grabbing a nearby roll of heavy-duty straps, he quickly devised a makeshift brace to stabilize the damaged scaffolding. Then, using his knowledge of leverage and weight distribution, he directed the crane operator to reposition the beam safely. Within minutes, the crisis was averted. "You saved us hours of cleanup," one of the foremen said later, clapping Ethan on the shoulder. "How'd you know what to do?" Ethan shrugged modestly. "Just figured it out as I went along." But the truth was, he hadn't just figured it out. His quick thinking came from years of studying architecture in his spare time. Late nights spent poring over books and online tutorials had given him a solid understanding of structural mechanics. What seemed like instinct to others was actually the result of countless hours of self-teaching. Word of Ethan's heroics spread quickly among the crew. Before long, people began seeking him out for advice. Senior engineers, who usually dismissed younger workers, started asking Ethan for input on complex issues. Even the foreman consulted him when planning tricky installations. It wasn't long before whispers of "the kid who knows more than he lets on" reached Marcus's ears. At first, Marcus dismissed the rumors. He refused to believe that someone like Ethan, a mere laborer, could possess skills beyond basic manual labor. But curiosity eventually got the better of him. One evening, after most of the crew had left for the day, Marcus lingered at the site, watching Ethan work. What he saw surprised him. Ethan moved with precision, handling tools and materials with ease. More impressively, he seemed to understand the broader picture, the way each piece fit into the overall structure. When another worker asked Ethan about reinforcing a wall, Ethan didn't just offer a solution. He explained why it would work, citing principles of tension and compression that Marcus himself had studied in college. For the first time, Marcus felt a flicker of doubt. Was this kid really as inexperienced as he claimed? Or had Marcus underestimated him completely? Determined to find answers, Marcus decided to test Ethan further. Over the next few days, he assigned Ethan increasingly challenging tasks. Tasks that required not only physical strength but also technical expertise. To Marcus's astonishment, Ethan completed every assignment flawlessly. Whether it was calculating load-bearing capacities or troubleshooting faulty equipment, Ethan handled everything with confidence and competence. Still, Marcus couldn't bring himself to admit that Ethan might be smarter than he appeared. Instead, he grew more irritable, snapping at Ethan whenever he dared to ask questions or suggest improvements. "Stop trying to act like you're in charge," Marcus barked during one particularly tense exchange. "You're here to follow orders, not give them." Ethan bit back his frustration. He didn't care about titles or recognition. He cared about doing the job right. But Marcus's constant belittlement was wearing thin. Despite the friction, Ethan continued to excel. His natural talent combined with his tireless work ethic made him indispensable to the team. And while Marcus tried to ignore it, he couldn't deny the impact Ethan was having on the project. Progress accelerated, mistakes decreased, and morale improved, all thanks to Ethan's contributions. Then, one fateful evening, fate intervened. After a long day of work, Ethan realized he'd left his notebook behind at the site. Inside its worn pages were sketches and notes detailing his architectural ideas, concepts he'd been developing in secret for months. Unbeknownst to Ethan, Marcus stumbled upon the notebook while tidying up the trailer. Flipping through the pages, Marcus froze. The sketches were breathtaking, innovative yet practical, showcasing a level of skill far beyond anything Marcus had seen from someone so young. One design featured a cantilevered roof system that maximized natural light while minimizing energy consumption. Another proposed a modular framework that reduced material waste without compromising structural integrity. Each page revealed not only technical mastery, but also creativity and vision. Marcus found himself staring at the drawings, unable to look away. For the first time in years, he felt a pang of envy, not because Ethan was better than him, but because Ethan represented something Marcus had lost: passion. When Ethan returned, the next morning to retrieve his notebook, he found Marcus waiting for him. Holding up the book, Marcus demanded, "Where did you learn to design like this?" Caught off guard, Ethan hesitated before answering. I taught myself," he admitted. "I've been reading books and taking online courses whenever I can afford them." Marcus stared at him, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, "This isn't beginner-level stuff. These are advanced concepts. You shouldn't even know half of this." "I guess I'm a fast learner," Ethan replied with a shrug, though his heart was racing. Marcus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he flipped through the notebook again, his eyes scanning the intricate designs. There was no denying Ethan's talent, but Marcus still couldn't reconcile it with his own preconceived notions. How could someone so young with no formal education produce work of such quality? "You think scribbling pretty pictures makes you an architect?" Marcus finally said, his tone laced with skepticism. "Real architects earn their place through years of hard work, not by doodling in secret." Ethan bristled at the insult, but held his ground. "Maybe I don't have your experience," he shot back. "But I know I have ideas worth listening to. If you'd stop treating me like I'm invisible, maybe you'd see that." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken tension. Marcus opened his mouth to retort, then closed it again. For once, he had no comeback. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the construction site, Marcus found himself reflecting on the day's events. Ethan's notebook lay open on the table beside him, its pages filled with possibilities Marcus hadn't considered. Perhaps there was more to this young man than met the eye, and perhaps, just perhaps, Marcus had something to learn from him. Unbeknownst to either of them, this moment marked the beginning of a transformation, one that would challenge their egos, redefine their roles, and ultimately lead to an alliance neither could have predicted. For now, though, the battle lines remained drawn. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming in Marcus's armor, and seeds of respect were beginning to take root. The tension between Ethan and Marcus reached a boiling point over the next few days. What had started as subtle disagreements now escalated into full-blown clashes, with both men refusing to back down. The construction site became a battleground, not of tools or materials, but of pride and ambition. Marcus couldn't shake off the images of Ethan's notebook from his mind. The sketches haunted him, not because they were bad, but because they were extraordinary. Every time he looked at them, he felt a gnawing sense of inadequacy creeping in, something he hadn't experienced in years. How could this kid, barely, out of his teens, create designs that rivaled those of seasoned professionals? It didn't make sense. And worse, it made Marcus question whether his own success was built on skill or simply arrogance. But Marcus wasn't ready to admit defeat, just yet. Instead, he doubled down on his hostility toward Ethan, determined to prove once and for all that talent alone wasn't enough to succeed in architecture. One morning, as the crew gathered around the blueprint table, Marcus called everyone's attention. "Listen up," he announced, his voice cutting through the chatter like a knife. "I've decided we need fresh ideas for the new wing of the building, so here's what we're going to do. Ethan and I will each submit a proposal. The best design wins and gets implemented." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew this was more than just a friendly competition. It was a direct challenge. Marcus had thrown down the gauntlet, and Ethan had no choice but to pick it up. Ethan felt a mix of emotions, nervousness, excitement, and a simmering anger. He knew Marcus was trying to humiliate him, to prove that someone like Ethan didn't belong in the same league as a professional architect. But instead of shrinking away, Ethan straightened his shoulders and nodded. "You're on," he said firmly, meeting Marcus's gaze without flinching. The rules were simple. Both men would have 1 week to prepare their proposals. They could use any resources available, but the final decision would be made by a panel of senior engineers and project managers. To ensure fairness, neither participant could discuss their plans with anyone else until presentation day. The week that changed everything. As the clock began ticking, Ethan threw himself into his work with renewed focus. He spent every waking moment sketching, calculating, and refining his ideas. His vision for the new wing was bold yet practical, a structure that blended seamlessly with its surroundings while incorporating cutting-edge technology. He drew inspiration from nature, designing walls that mimicked tree bark patterns to improve insulation and roofs angled to capture rainwater for reuse. Late at night, after the rest of the crew had gone home, Ethan stayed behind, poring over blueprints under the dim glow of a work lamp. His hands were calloused from hours of manual labor, but his mind was sharp, fueled by caffeine and determination. He poured everything he had into this project, not just to win, but to prove to himself that he belonged in this world. Meanwhile, Marcus worked in solitude, surrounded by stacks of reference books and digital renderings on his laptop. Unlike Ethan, who relied on intuition and creativity, Marcus approached the task methodically, sticking to tried and true techniques. His design was sleek and modern, featuring glass facades and sharp angles meant to impress. But as the deadline loomed, closer doubts began to creep in. Was his approach too predictable? Too flashy? Despite his confidence, Marcus found himself glancing at Ethan's workstation whenever he thought no one was looking. There was something about the younger man's quiet intensity that unnerved him. For the first time in years, Marcus felt uncertain, and that feeling ate away at him. Presentation day. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. The entire crew gathered in the makeshift conference room, eager to see what the two competitors had come up with. The atmosphere was electric, a mix of anticipation and nervous energy. Even the usually stoic foreman seemed intrigued. Marcus went first. Standing before the panel, he confidently presented his design, walking them through every detail with practiced ease. His model featured sweeping curves and reflective surfaces, designed to catch the eye of passers-by. As he spoke, he emphasized the aesthetic appeal of the structure, highlighting how it would become a landmark in the cityscape. When he finished, polite applause filled the room. The panel nodded appreciatively, though some members exchanged skeptical glances. While Marcus's design was visually striking, it lacked substance. Several flaws were pointed out during the Q&A session, including concerns about sustainability and maintenance costs. By the time Marcus stepped aside, his usual swagger had faded slightly. Then it was Ethan's turn. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped forward. Unlike Marcus, who exuded confidence, Ethan appeared humble and unassuming. But when he began speaking, the room fell silent. His passion was palpable as he explained his concept, a harmonious blend of form and function. This design isn't just about looking good, Ethan said, gesturing to his model. It's about working smarter. These walls are made from recycled materials, reducing waste. The roof is angled to collect rainwater, which can then be used for irrigation. And the natural ventilation system cuts down on energy costs without sacrificing comfort. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. But most importantly, this building isn't just a structure, it's a statement. A reminder that innovation doesn't have to come at the expense of the environment. By the time Ethan finished, the room erupted into applause. Even Marcus, standing at the back of the room, clapped reluctantly. The panel members peppered Ethan with questions, but his answers were thoughtful and well-researched. It was clear that he had put his heart and soul into this project. The aftermath. When the presentations ended, the panel retreated to deliberate. The wait felt endless, with everyone exchanging whispers and speculations. Finally, they returned, and the head engineer stood to announce the winner. After careful consideration, he said, glancing between Marcus and Ethan, "We've decided to implement Ethan Carter's design." A cheer broke out among the crew, but Ethan remained composed, nodding respectfully to the panel. Beside him, Marcus stood frozen, his face unreadable. For a moment it seemed like he might argue or storm off, but instead he surprised everyone by stepping forward. "I misjudged you," Marcus admitted gruffly, addressing Ethan directly. "Your talent is undeniable, but talent isn't enough. You need discipline if you want to succeed in this field." Ethan blinked, taken aback by the unexpected acknowledgement. "Thank you," he replied cautiously. To everyone's astonishment, Marcus extended an olive branch. "If you're serious about becoming an architect, I'll mentor you, but don't expect me to go easy on you." For the first time, Ethan saw a glimmer of respect in Marcus's eyes. Though wary, he accepted the offer, sensing an opportunity to grow. What followed was an uneasy alliance. At first, their partnership was rocky, with Marcus struggling to let go of his controlling nature and Ethan fighting to assert himself. But gradually, they found common ground. Marcus taught Ethan the intricacies of professional architecture, the technical jargon, the networking skills, the importance of deadlines. In return, Ethan inspired Marcus to embrace innovation and think outside the box. A turning point. By the end of the month, the foundation for the new wing was laid according to Ethan's design. Workers marveled at how seamlessly the structure fit into its surroundings, proving that beauty and functionality could coexist. Meanwhile, Marcus found himself changing in ways he never expected. Teaching Ethan forced him to confront his own biases and rediscover the joy of creation. For Ethan, the experience was transformative. He finally felt seen, not as a laborer, but as a visionary. Facing adversity had taught him resilience, while forgiving Marcus had shown him the power of compassion. Though their journey was far from over, both men emerged stronger from the clash of egos. What had begun as a bitter rivalry evolved into a partnership rooted in mutual respect. Together, they proved that even the most unlikely alliances could yield extraordinary results. And so, amidst the dust and noise of the construction site, two men forged a bond that would shape not only their futures, but also the skyline of the city itself. The partnership between Ethan and Marcus was far from smooth sailing. In fact, it often felt like navigating a stormy sea, with unpredictable waves of tension crashing against their fragile truce. Yet despite the challenges, both men found themselves growing, not just professionally but personally, as they learned to navigate each other's strengths and weaknesses. At first, Marcus struggled to adapt to the idea of mentoring someone like Ethan. His entire career had been built on being the smartest person in the room, the one everyone looked up to. Sharing that spotlight, even with someone as talented as Ethan, was uncomfortable for him. He masked his discomfort with sarcasm, frequently reminding Ethan that raw talent wasn't enough to succeed in the cutthroat world of architecture. "You think knowing how to draw pretty lines makes you an architect?" Marcus snapped, one afternoon as they reviewed blueprints together. "This industry eats people like you alive. You need strategy, connections, and a spine of steel if you want to survive." Ethan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied the older man carefully, noting the subtle signs of frustration in Marcus's posture. The clenched jaw, the tapping foot. He realized that Marcus wasn't just criticizing him, he was projecting his own fears onto Ethan. "Not trying to replace you," Ethan said calmly, breaking the silence. "I'm trying to learn from you, but I also have ideas worth listening to. Maybe we can meet halfway." Marcus stared at him, caught off guard by the maturity in Ethan's tone. For a moment he considered arguing, but something stopped him. Perhaps it was the sincerity in Ethan's voice, or maybe it was the realization that he'd been fighting a losing battle all along. Either way, Marcus sighed and nodded reluctantly. "Fine," he muttered. "But don't expect me to sugarcoat things. If you screw up, I'll call you out on it. That's fair," Ethan replied with a small smile. Lessons learned. Over the next few weeks, their dynamic shifted subtly. Marcus began teaching Ethan the finer points of professional architecture, things that couldn't be learned from books or online courses. He introduced Ethan to influential figures in the industry, showing him how to network effectively. He drilled him on technical jargon, emphasizing the importance of precision in communication. And he pushed Ethan to think critically about every decision, no matter how small. But perhaps the most valuable lesson Marcus imparted was resilience. Architecture, he explained, was as much about perseverance as it was about creativity. Projects rarely went according to plan. Budgets were tight and clients could be impossible to please. Success depended not on avoiding failure, but on learning how to recover from it. Ethan soaked up everything Marcus taught him like a sponge. He asked questions, took notes, and applied what he learned to real-world scenarios. Yet, even as he absorbed Marcus's wisdom, he continued to challenge him. Whenever Marcus insisted on sticking to traditional methods, Ethan gently suggested alternatives. "Forget concrete walls," Ethan argued, during one particularly heated discussion. "What if we use cross-laminated timber instead? It's lighter, cheaper, and better for the environment." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "And risk compromising structural integrity? No thanks." "It's been tested extensively," Ethan countered, pulling up research papers on his tablet. "Look at these case studies. Timber is stronger than you think, and more sustainable." After a long pause, Marcus relented. "All right, fine. Let's run some simulations. But if this backfires, it's on you." To everyone's surprise, the experiment worked. Not only did the timber perform exceptionally well, but it also reduced costs significantly. The success of the project earned them praise from the client and admiration from the crew. Slowly but surely, Marcus began to see Ethan in a new light. What had once seemed like arrogance now appeared to be confidence. What he'd dismissed as naivety turned out to be innovation. And what he'd assumed was ignorance revealed itself as curiosity, a trait Marcus hadn't valued until now. A new perspective. As the months passed, Marcus underwent a quiet transformation. Teaching Ethan forced him to confront aspects of himself he'd long ignored. He realized that his arrogance hadn't stemmed from superiority but from insecurity. He'd spent years building walls around himself, convinced that vulnerability was a weakness. But watching Ethan embrace mistakes as opportunities to grow made Marcus question whether he'd been approaching life all wrong. One evening, after a particularly grueling day on site, Marcus invited Ethan to join him for dinner at a nearby cafe. It was the first time he'd ever extended such an invitation, and Ethan accepted cautiously, unsure of what to expect. Over steaming cups of coffee, Marcus surprised Ethan by opening up. "I've been thinking," Marcus began hesitantly, stirring sugar into his cup. "You remind me of myself when I was younger, before I let this job harden me." Ethan blinked, surprised by the admission. What do you mean? Marcus sighed, leaning back in his chair. When I started out, I was passionate about creating meaningful spaces. I wanted my work to make a difference, to leave a legacy. But somewhere along the way I lost sight of that. I got so caught up in proving myself that I forgot why I became an architect in the first place. Ethan listened quietly, sensing the weight of Marcus's words. You've reminded me of what matters, Marcus continued. Not accolades or awards, but the impact we can have on people's lives through our designs. That's something I haven't thought about in years. For the first time, Ethan saw Marcus not as a rival, but as a human being, flawed, vulnerable, and capable of change. Building bridges, their newfound understanding deepened their collaboration. Together, they tackled projects that pushed boundaries, blending Marcus's expertise with Ethan's fresh perspective. They designed schools that inspired learning, homes that fostered community, and public spaces that brought people together. Each project was a testament to their evolving partnership, one that balanced tradition with innovation. Word of their success spread quickly. Critics hailed their work as groundbreaking, praising its ingenuity and sustainability. Clients sought them out, eager to benefit from their unique approach. Even competitors began taking notice, though begrudgingly. Yet despite their growing fame, neither man let it go to their head. Marcus continued to mentor Ethan, guiding him through the complexities of the industry while secretly learning from his protege. Ethan, in turn, remained humble, always striving to improve and innovate. By the end of the year, they decided to take their partnership to the next level. With the support of the construction company, they founded their own firm, Kane & Carter Architects. Their mission was simple yet ambitious: to create structures that were not only functional and beautiful but also environmentally responsible. On the day they officially launched the firm, Ethan stood beside Marcus, gazing at the crowd gathered to celebrate their achievement. "We did it," Ethan said softly, turning to Marcus with a grin. Marcus smiled back, a rare expression of genuine pride lighting up his face. "No, you did it. I just gave you a push." Ethan shook his head. "We did it together. This wouldn't have happened without both of us." As the applause filled the air, Marcus felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in decades. For the first time in years, he believed in the future, not just for himself, but for the industry as a whole. And standing beside him, Ethan knew he'd finally found his place in the world. Looking ahead, though their journey was far from over, Ethan and Marcus had laid the foundation for something extraordinary. Their story served as a reminder that growth often comes from conflict, and that true greatness isn't achieved alone. It's built through collaboration. Together, they proved that even the most unlikely partnerships could yield remarkable results. And as they looked toward the horizon, ready to tackle whatever challenges lay ahead, one thing was certain: the best was yet to come. Months turned into years, and the partnership between Ethan Carter and Marcus Kane grew stronger with each passing day. What had begun as a reluctant mentorship evolved into a genuine friendship, one that transformed not only their lives but also the architectural landscape of the city they called home. Together, they built more than just structures. They created legacies. Kane and Carter Architects quickly became a name synonymous with innovation and excellence. Their firm attracted clients from all walks of life: developers seeking cutting-edge designs, communities longing for sustainable spaces, and even governments looking to revitalize neglected areas. Each project was a testament to their shared vision: architecture that served humanity while respecting the planet. But behind every success story lay countless challenges, moments of doubt and lessons learned the hard way. For both Ethan and Marcus, the journey wasn't without its struggles. Yet, through perseverance, trust, and mutual respect, they overcame obstacles that might have broken lesser partnerships. The first big breakthrough, their first major breakthrough, came when they won a competition to redesign an abandoned industrial site on the outskirts of the city. The area had been neglected for decades, overrun by weeds and littered with rusting machinery. Many developers saw it as a lost cause, but Ethan and Marcus envisioned something different: a vibrant community hub that combined residential, commercial, and recreational spaces. The proposal they submitted was bold yet practical. It featured solar-powered lighting, green rooftops, and modular housing units made from recycled materials. Perhaps most importantly, it included plans for a public park at the heart of the development, a space where families could gather, children could play, and nature could thrive. When the judges announced their decision, there was no mistaking the excitement in the room. "This design isn't just innovative," one judge remarked during the ceremony. "It's transformative. You've taken a forgotten piece of land and turned it into a beacon of hope." The victory marked a turning point for Kane and Carter architects. Suddenly, they were inundated with requests, from corporate giants wanting eco-friendly headquarters to local governments seeking affordable housing solutions. Every new project brought fresh opportunities to push boundaries and challenge conventions. Yet, amidst the whirlwind of success, Ethan never forgot his roots. He insisted on hiring workers from disadvantaged backgrounds, offering them training, programs, and steady employment. "We didn't get here alone," he reminded Marcus during one meeting. "We owe it to others to help them rise too." Marcus, who once scoffed at such idealism, now found himself agreeing wholeheartedly. Watching Ethan interact with the crew reminded him of his younger self, the man he used to be before cynicism took hold. Facing adversity. Together, despite their growing reputation, not everything went smoothly. One particularly challenging project nearly derailed their progress entirely. Tasked with designing a high-rise office building in the heart of downtown, Ethan and Marcus faced relentless pressure from the client, a wealthy corporation determined to prioritize aesthetics over functionality. "They want glass walls everywhere," Ethan complained during one late-night brainstorming session. "But that's going to skyrocket energy costs. Not to mention it'll make the interior unbearable during summer." Marcus nodded grimly. "And they're refusing to budge on the budget. If we suggest alternatives, they'll accuse us of incompetence." For days, they wrestled with the problem, trying to find a compromise that satisfied both the clients' demands and their own principles. Just when it seemed like they'd hit a dead end, Ethan had an idea. "What if we use smart glass?" he suggested. "It adjusts tint based on sunlight, reducing glare and heat absorption. It's expensive up front, but it'll save money in the long run, and it's environmentally friendly." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Do you think they'll go for it?" "It's worth a shot," Ethan replied. "At least we'll have tried." To everyone's surprise, the client agreed. The finished building became a landmark, praised for its sleek appearance and energy efficiency. Once again, Ethan and Marcus proved that creativity and compromise could coexist. Legacy beyond blueprints. As their careers flourished, so did their personal lives. Ethan finally moved out of his cramped apartment and into a cozy house near the park he'd helped design. On weekends, he spent time mentoring young architects, sharing the knowledge he'd gained from Marcus. His passion for teaching inspired many, just as Marcus' guidance had inspired him. Marcus, meanwhile, rediscovered hobbies he'd abandoned years ago. He took up painting, finding joy in capturing the beauty of the buildings he'd helped create. Occasionally, he invited Ethan to join him, and together, they explored the city through art. Their relationship deepened beyond work. They celebrated holidays together, supported each other during tough times, and laughed over shared memories of their early clashes. Though vastly different in personality, they complemented each other perfectly, one driven by logic, the other by emotion, one rooted in tradition, the other fueled by innovation. Changing the world, one building at a time. Years later, as they stood atop the roof of their latest masterpiece, a sprawling cultural center designed to unite diverse communities, Ethan turned to Marcus with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met?" he asked. Marcus chuckled. "Probably nothing good. I'd still be stuck in my old ways, and you'd probably be working some dead-end job somewhere." Ethan smiled. "Maybe, but look at us now. We've changed each other, and maybe even the world, just a little bit." Marcus nodded, gazing out at the skyline they'd helped shape. You know, I used to think success meant being the best. Now I realize it's about making a difference. And whether it's through these buildings or the people we've touched. Along the way, I think we've done that. Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. For all the battles they'd fought and the victories they'd achieved, this moment felt like the true culmination of their journey. Inspiring the next generation word of their achievements spread far beyond the city limits. Students studying architecture began citing Kane and Carter architects as pioneers of sustainable design. Documentaries featured their projects, highlighting how they balanced form and function with environmental responsibility. Awards lined the walls of their office, but neither man cared much for accolades anymore. What mattered most was the impact they'd made, not just on skylines, but on lives. Their story became a legend in the industry, inspiring countless others to dream big and never underestimate the potential of those around them. One evening, as they prepared to leave the office, Ethan paused by the door. Do you remember that day on the construction site, when you challenged me to design the new wing? Marcus grinned. How could I forget? That was the day I realized you weren't just some kid tinkering with blueprints. You were the real deal. And you? Ethan teased. You were the arrogant architect who thought he knew everything. Marcus laughed, shaking his head. Well, turns out I didn't know half as much as I thought. But thanks to you, I learned a lot more than I bargained for. As they walked into the night, side by side, it was clear that their bond extended far beyond professional collaboration. They were partners, friends, and mentors to each other, a duo whose combined strengths had reshaped not only their destinies but also the future of architecture itself. And though their story had humble beginnings, a clash of egos on a dusty construction site, it ended as a shining example of what could be achieved when two people chose to build bridges instead of walls. Together, they proved that greatness isn't defined by titles or degrees. It's defined by the courage to grow, the humility to learn, and the determination to leave the world better than you found it. For Ethan and Marcus, the sky was no longer the limit. It was just the beginning.